What if I told you one of the slowest animals on Earth is also one of the most successful? Today, we're painting an adorable sloth hanging out in the lush forests of Latin America. And along the way, we'll learn why taking life slowly works surprisingly well for these fascinating animals. Hello, and thank you for joining me. Today, we're continuing our Latin American wildlife watercolor series with one of the most beloved animals in the world, the sloth. There's just something about a sloth that makes people smile. Maybe it's the relaxed expression, maybe the slow movements, or maybe it's because they seem completely unaffected by the stress and chaos of everyday life. Either way, they make a wonderful watercolor subject. Let's begin by creating a rough sketch using watercolor pencils. At this stage, don't worry about perfection. We are simply establishing the main shapes and composition. Start with a branch that will support the sloth, then sketch the rounded body, long arms, and distinctive facial features. One of the advantages of watercolor pencils is that they allow us to lightly map out our painting while also contributing pigment later when activated with water. Once the sketch is complete, we can begin painting. We'll start with a very diluted base layer on the sloth. Use soft, warm grays and a touch of earthy green if you'd like to reflect some of the surrounding environment. Keep the paint light and transparent. These first layer act as a foundation for everything that follows. Remember, watercolor is all about building gradually. You don't need a strong contrast right away. Now, while the sloth begins to dry, let's move to the surrounding landscape. Apply a soft layer of green throughout the foliage and surrounding vegetation. Don't worry about individual leaves yet. Focus on establishing the overall shapes and colors. Allow the colors to blend naturally in places. One of the beautiful things about watercolor is that it often creates effects that feel organic and alive. Let's talk a little about our sleepy friend. Sloths are found throughout Central and South America, spending most of their lives high in the forest canopy. Countries such as Costa Rica, Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, and Venezuela are home to several species of sloths. Their entire lifestyle revolves around conserving energy. In fact, sloths have one of the slowest metabolisms of any mammal. Everything they do happens at a relaxed pace. Even digestion can take weeks. Yet despite moving slowly, sloths have survived for millions of years. Sometimes being efficient is more important than being fast. And then a gentle blue wash for the sky. Next, let's paint the branch. Using diluted browns and hints of warm tones, establish the basic structure. This branch plays an important role because it anchors the sloth within the composition. Now, our first layers should be dry enough to begin building additional contrast. Using more saturated paint, start adding darker shadows to the sloth. Focus on areas beneath the arms, around the face, and where the body curves away from the light. These darker values help create form and dimension. Notice how the sloth immediately begins to feel more three-dimensional. Now we'll begin adding a mid-tone layer. This stage is one of the most important of the painting. Midtones help bridge the gap between the lightest and darkest values, creating smoother transitions and a more realistic appearance. Think of them as the glue that connects the painting together. Work slowly and build the color gradually. There is no rush. Let's deepen some of the greens in the surrounding vegetation. Layering different shades of greens help create and gives the background a more natural appearance. Try varying your mixture slightly. A little yellow here, a touch of blue there. Nature rarely uses just one shade of green. Now, let's move to the face. Using a finer brush and slightly thicker paint, carefully define the eyes and nose. These are the most important details in the painting because they're what viewers connect with emotionally. Take your time here. A few careful strokes can completely change the expression. Add subtle shadows around the eyes and gentle variations in color around the face. Notice how the sloth begins to come alive. At this stage, we're no longer painting shapes, we're painting personality. One of the things that inspired this painting is how perfectly sloths seem adapted to their environment. Often host tiny algae that can give it a slight green tint. This helps them blend into the trees and makes them surprisingly difficult for predators to spot. Some sloths can even turn their heads nearly 270 degrees, allowing them to observe their surroundings without moving their bodies very much. That's a pretty useful skill when your strategy is to remain unnoticed. Now, let's add a few final adjustments throughout the landscape. Deepen some shadows in the greenery, add some subtle texture to the leaves, refine the branch, look for opportunities to strengthen contrast without overworking the painting. Step back from your painting occasionally. It is amazing how much easier it becomes to see what needs adjustment when you're viewing the artwork from a distance. And now we come back to the watercolor pencils, one of my favorite stages. Using the pencils, we can add small details and textures that would be difficult to achieve with a brush alone. Use short directional marks to suggest a fur texture, add a little extra contrast around the face, enhance shadows in the branch, refine areas in the foliage. These finishing touches help unify the piece and add visual interest without losing the softness that makes watercolor so appealing. Now, let's return to the branch. Using slightly darker browns, begin adding texture and shadow. A few small variations in value can make the wood feel much more realistic. You don't need to paint every crack and groove, just suggest them. The viewer's imagination will do the rest. Continue moving back and forth between the sloth and the landscape. This allows each section time to dry while preventing colors from becoming muddy. As the painting develops, you'll notice the contrast slowly increasing. That's exactly what we want. Watercolor rewards patience. Layer by layer, the image gains depth, texture, and character. As we approach the finish line, remember that not every area needs equal detail. Allow some sections to remain soft and suggestive. That contrast between loose and detailed areas often creates the most engaging paintings. And there we have it. A relaxed sloth enjoying life high in the forest of Latin America. Slowly layered watercolor washes, rich greens, subtle textures, and careful detail all working together to create a peaceful wildlife scene. Thank you so much for painting along with me today. I hope this project inspires you to slow down a little, enjoy the process, and remember that sometimes the best things happen one layer at a time. Until next time, happy painting!